Today's story, Lighthouse Keeper's Last Shift, Maine. A new keeper takes charge of a lonely lighthouse. This is going to be a great horror story, so let's get started with today's video. Fog hugged the shoreline like a living thing, slow and patient. The ferry puttered away, leaving Jonah Hale alone with the lighthouse and the goals. He had studied the maintenance logs, memorized the old keeper's routines, and signed the transfer papers in the town hall, formalities that felt thin against the raw Atlantic wind. The lighthouse rose from the rock like an accusation, its white paint weathered and salt-streaked, its windows blind and watchful. Jonah hauled his trunk up the stone path, the boards groaning under each step. The lantern room's glass reflected him small and hesitant. Then the keeper's door closed behind him with a finality he did not like. Inside smelled of oil and lemon and paper, old charts, dog-eared logbooks, cigarette butts in an ashtray around which someone had traced nervous circles. The bed in the small room looked slept in. Jonah ran a hand over the pillow and felt the slight warmth of recent use. He found a note under a brass weight on the desk. Welcome. Jonah's fingers trembled as he read the looping script. No name, no signature. The radio on the shelf crackled with static, and then a voice, distant and wrong. Did you get it? The voice cut. He tried the lamp. Its mechanism was stiff, like an animal waking. The spiral stairs were damp underfoot. Every surface hummed with someone else's presence. An open mug, a towel hung on a rail, staged as proof that the previous keeper had been here. He told himself these were traces of habit, not haunting. He told himself stories to steady his breath. Still, when he set the logbook in place, the top page already bore a fresh entry in the same looping hand. 11:03 p.m., wind rising, watchful. Jonah swallowed, heart hammering. The lighthouse thinned the day into a concentration of sound. Wind on metal, the slow thump of waves, the clockwork heartbeat of the lens. Jonah set the kettle on a battered stove and listened to the house settle. Night arrived faster than he expected, folding the cove into ink. He finished chores, polishing brass, oiling gears, checking the foghorn, and felt solitude like a second skin. He cataloged each task aloud, a ritual to push the hollowness back into names. At 11:03 p.m., the radio flicked on by itself. Static, like distant surf, and then the same voice murmured, softer now, the syllables leaning. Stay with the light. Jonah's palms went slick. He moved to the base of the stairs and called, "Hello? Mr. Carver?" The name felt ceremonial. No answer. The stairway breathed old air. He climbed. The spiral tightened, the beam from his flashlight lancing worn steps. Midway, a smell rose, cigarette smoke and liniment, the ghost smell of a man who had measured time by tides. On the landing, boots sat, muddy, bristled with salt, rigid as if someone had just stepped out. Jonah touched one. The leather was warm. In the lantern room, the lamp was trimmed and the wick adjusted. No fingerprints marked the glass, but the lens hummed with a patient frequency. A chessboard lay mid-game. The pieces waited, Black King exposed. Beside it, the logbook's newest entry continued in the same hand. 11:12 p.m. Not alone. Jonah laughed once, a thin sound, then a breeze moved the black pawn a hair's breadth. Something near the railing exhaled. The voice, now close enough to hurt, said the name he'd used in town, Jonah, slow and kind, and asked, almost friendly, "You keep watch well." He answered before he could think, without deciding then. Jonah didn't remember moving, only that he was suddenly at the railing, knuckles white against cold metal. The lantern's rotation washed the room in slow pulses of light, revealing nothing but dust and the Atlantic's dark heave beyond the glass. Still, he had heard it, his name, intimate as a hand on his shoulder. He forced a breath through tight lungs. "Who's there?" he called, voice brittle. Silence thickened. The lamp's beam swung, revealing his reflection, then the empty room behind him. He stepped away from the window, gripping the flashlight. The beam jittered, his pulse boomed in his ears. Below, something clinked. A ceramic tap, like a mug lifted and set down. Then footsteps, slow, unhurried, familiar. Jonah descended the stairs, one careful step at a time. The smell of liniment returned, stronger now. Smoke drifted through the air, fresh and acrid. At the bottom, the keeper's kitchen glowed with the weak amber of a single lamp. A mug steamed on the table. Jonah had not made it. A man sat in the chair facing the wall. Broad shoulders, navy sweater, gray hair clipped short. The posture of someone who had spent his life listening to storms as though they were sermons. Jonah froze mid-step. "Mr. Carver?" It came out in a whisper. The man didn't turn. Instead, his voice rasped low like a rope pulled across stone. "Shift's not over." A pause. "Not for either of us." Jonah's stomach folded. He stepped back. The chair creaked. Carver rising. A hand, pale and calloused, curled around the backrest, then another. But when he stepped clear of the shadow, his face was wrong. Not mangled, not monstrous, just absent, features blurred, as if forgotten. Jonah bolted for the stairs. Behind him, Carver's boots struck the floor deliberately, following. Jonah's feet hammered the steps as he climbed, lungs burning, throat tight with a sound he refused to let become a scream. The lighthouse spiraled endlessly, the shadows thickening behind him. Carver's footsteps followed at a steady, patient rhythm, not hurried, not angry, purposeful, as if he were walking toward a duty he had never stopped performing. Jonah burst into the lantern room and slammed the hatch shut behind him. The lock clicked into place, flimsy as a toy. He backed into the room, hands shaking. The lantern's slow rotation cast long ribs of light across the walls, bending and stretching with each pass. The logbook lay open on the floor. He hadn't left it like that. Jonah swallowed, inching closer. The pages fluttered, although the air was still. Ink bled across the newest entry, forming words in looping strokes. Carver's handwriting, alive and deliberate. 12:03 a.m. The new keeper won't listen. They never do. The lantern beam passed, and for an instant the page showed another line, written darker, as if carved rather than inked. "I only stayed to warn you." Jonah stumbled backward. The hatch rattled behind him. Carver tested the lock with the patience of a man tapping barometer glass. He braced his back against the railing, breath coming in cold, jagged bursts. He grabbed the radio and thumbed the receiver. "Harbor Station? Anyone? This is Keeper Hale at Breakwater Point. I need assistance. There's someone here. Repeat, there's someone—" Static swallowed him. Then, under the static, a faint reply. "Leave the tower. Leave before he finishes." Jonah froze. The voice was not Carver's, not human even. It sounded like wind forced through a throat that had never breathed air. The hatch gave a sudden, sharp crack. Carver's voice seeped through the seam, gentle as a bedtime whisper. "Jonah, you're late for rounds." The hatch shuddered again, harder this time. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Jonah grabbed the only thing resembling a weapon, a brass oil can, and held it like a fragile club. His breath fogged the glass as the lantern continued its endless rotation, casting bars of pale light across the trembling door. "Stay back," Jonah said, though the words had no strength. Carver didn't push again. Instead, he spoke through the metal, his voice soft and unbearably calm. You think I want this, Jonah? Think I wanted any of it? A sigh. The sea chooses the keeper. Not the service, not the man. Jonah backed toward the lens. You're dead. You have to be. Silence. A long, aching silence that pressed against his ribs like rising water. Then Carver said, almost mournfully, if only that mattered. The hatch eased open, not violently, but with the gentle patience of someone who had opened it 1,000 times. The lock dissolved into rust flakes that skittered across the floor. Jonah staggered back as the hatch swung wide, and Carver stepped into the lantern room. His form wavered, sometimes crisp, sometimes smeared like wet paint. His boots left no sound. His face remained a blurred absence, features only suggested in the vaguest strokes, yet his presence filled the room, heavy as storm air. Every keeper lasts a little less, Carver said, approaching the lens. The light isn't just a beacon, it's a mouth, a hunger. It watches the ocean so the ocean can watch back. Jonah shook his head, gripping the oil can tighter. I don't want your job. I don't want any of this. Carver turned toward him, the suggestion of eyes fixing onto Jonah with unbearable focus. No one wants the last shift, he said. But the lamp chose you the moment you touched the threshold. The lantern beam cut through Carver's body, revealing bones for a heartbeat. Then nothing. Help me finish this, he said, and maybe you'll leave with more of yourself than I did. Jonah pressed himself against the cold curve of the lens housing as Carver drifted closer, not walking now, but gliding on a current Jonah could not feel. The lantern beam sliced through fog and darkness outside, and each rotation made the room pulse like a single enormous heartbeat. Carver rested a hand, if it could be called that, against the glass. The lens dimmed for a moment, as if reacting to his touch. You hear it by now, he murmured. Jonah shook his head, but he did hear something. A low, thrumming sound beneath the mechanical hum, a pressure behind his ears swelling and fading like breath. At first he'd mistaken it for the wind, but now it grew into faint, overlapping whispers. Carver's blurred face tilted toward the sea. It's older than the tower, older than us. The first keeper listened to it, the second obeyed. I tried to outlast it. Jonah squeezed the oil can until his knuckles blanched. What does it want? Carver turned toward him. For the first time, Jonah sensed fear in that shifting form. Witnesses, he said. It wants eyes. It wants the lamp tended so it can look upon the water, because something out there calls to it, something it must watch and keep contained. The whispers surged, hundreds of voices, rustling like seaweed dragged over stone. Jonah clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound crawled straight through bone. Carver reached toward him. You have to complete the cycle. Trim the wick, keep the light steady. If the light falters, the sea will answer, and then none of us will have a shape left to return to. Jonah stumbled back. I'm not finishing anything. The lighthouse groaned, deep, seismic. The lantern flickered. Outside, the ocean rose in a single impossible swell, black-green and waiting. Carver recoiled, his outline shuddering. Jonah, keep the light. Jonah stared at the trembling wick, at the trembling sea, at the trembling man who wasn't a man anymore. And then everything went dark. Darkness swallowed the lantern room, thick, absolute, ocean deep. Jonah's breath hitched as the world collapsed into sound, the groan of metal ribs, wind clawing at glass, the vast churn of the sea answering the extinguished light. The whispers that had pressed at the edges of his mind now surged in full chorus, 1,000 voices rising from beneath the waves. Carver's form flared and faded like a dying ember. "Jonah, relight it!" His voice broke with something between terror and pleading. "Before it breaches!" Jonah fumbled through the dark, hands searching for the lighter, the wick trimmer, anything. His fingers brushed cold brass, then something wetter, slick like algae and pulsing beneath his palm. He jerked back, heart thundering. Something else was in the room now, something that had climbed the tower in the dark. A shape scraped across the floor, long and heavy. The glass panes shivered in their frames. Jonah's shaking hands finally closed around the lighter. He thumbed it, once, twice, each spark a brief, trembling star swallowed instantly by the dark. Carver's voice frayed into a whisper. "Don't let it see without the lens. Don't let it free." A massive weight pressed against the outer glass, a single, searching presence, larger than any wave, heavier than any storm. The tower groaned under its curiosity. Jonah felt its attention like a hook buried behind his eyes. The lighter finally caught. A small flame wavered. Jonah lunged for the wick, thrusting the flame into the heart of the lantern. Light erupted, blinding, pure, a column of fire and glass. The shape outside recoiled, with a shriek like a ship's hull tearing open. The whispers scattered into the wind. The tower steadied beneath Jonah's feet. Carver knelt, flickering. Relief softened the blur of his face. "You held the light, then your shift is almost done." Jonah slumped against the railing, tears streaking down his salt-bitten cheeks. "I want to go home." Carver shook his head slowly. "Breakwater Point has no home to return from. The light chose you. The sea recognized you." His hand, pale, translucent, rested briefly on Jonah's shoulder. "You'll last longer than I did, but not forever." Jonah stared into the lens. The flame burned steadily now, a heartbeat not entirely his. Carver stepped back toward the stairs, his outline frayed like rope ends caught in a gale. He paused. "When your replacement comes, you must warn them. Whether they listen, that's never been within our keeping." His form unraveled into drifting threads of light and shadow, then vanished. Alone, Jonah turned the lamp's crank, keeping its beam sweeping across the restless sea. The whispers lingered in the fog, but did not approach. Hours later, when dawn bled pale across the horizon, the radio crackled with a message. "New keeper en route. Ferry arriving at noon." Jonah closed his eyes. The cycle had begun again.